In the United States, we love our dairy. We blanket our nachos in cheese, we waterboard our school children with milk, we even smuggle extra cheese into the crusts of cheese pizzas and inside of taco shells that are already full of additional cheese. The United States Department of Agriculture is so worried about Americans not getting enough milk that they recommend every man, woman, and child over the age of 8 drinks 3 cups of milk every single day. Our celebrities drink milk, our athletes drink milk, even the white stripes on the American flag are literally a symbol for American dairy and agriculture. Okay, that's not true, but for a second, you genuinely thought they were, and that's the point. So what if I told you that it's actually illegal for an American school to do anything that could negatively impact the sale of milk? Or what if you found out that a lot of the nutrition claims the dairy industry makes come from studies they funded themselves? Did you know that the dairy industry has spent $100 million to make it illegal to use the word milk on anything that's not, in their words, the lacteal secretion of healthy cows? See, the United States is swimming in milk and cheese and butter and yogurt, but it's not simply because we like it. The dairy industry has spent 100 years and billions of dollars to systematically infiltrate the American diet and political system, and honestly, they crushed it. Great job, boys, way to go. But the part that is not so great is that all this dairy has led to a gaggle of health and environmental problems that the dairy industry has tried to downplay for decades. And be forewarned, because once you start to see the tactics that big dairy uses to manipulate the American public, you can't unsee them. Hi, I'm Rollie Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy degree and the physical ability to drink a gallon of milk in under an hour. I just don't feel like doing it right now. And this is a video about the dairy industry manipulating America. Welcome to Climate Town. Americans have been pounding milk since the founding fathers, but our story really begins during World War II. That's right, gather round everybody's dad, we're talking about the war. During the war, American farmers and ranchers had to feed Americans, plus the US Army, plus our European allies who couldn't grow much on their own fields because they were busy being exploded by Nazis. As a result, American dairy producers were putting up first-team all-conference milk numbers with the full endorsement and encouragement of the US government. When the war ended and demand cratered, US dairy farmers were stuck with millions of cows and a massive supply of that white-hot, creamy gold. Milk. I'm just gonna say milk from now on, I'm so sorry. Dairy farmers were correctly worried about who they were gonna sell all that milk to. But those are our American dairy farmers out there, and we take care of our own. So in 1949, the US government created the Milk Price Support Program and promised dairy farmers that Uncle Sam would buy any surplus milk that they produced but weren't able to sell on the open market. Technically, they would purchase storable dairy products, cheese, non-fat dry milk,
fresh golden butter.
But since that all comes from milk, dairy farmers now had the governmental green light to crank gallon after gallon out of their army of cows. America also passed the National School Lunch Program of 1946 with the dual purpose of feeding America's school children and creating a captive market for the government to offload some of the surplus food it was buying from our overly productive farmers. If you associate milk with school lunches, you probably have the National School Lunch Program to thank. Dairy was also getting a big boost from their wingman, the USDA.
Milk is about the most perfect food there is. A glassful at every meal is good for you, and with one more, that makes a quart a day.
In the 1950s, their official dietary recommendations to help the American public make healthy food choices were the basic 4 food groups. And not only did they give milk its own category, it's the fucking first one. They crammed the entire pantheon of vegetables and fruits together to give milk its own lemon? What the fuck is this graphic design? And bread is an orange? Boys, there's a fruit section. Make the fruit. You know what? As long as all the teens in America remember to drink a daily minimum of 4 cups of milk, that's all that really matters.
Dairy foods are included at every meal in this weight reduction diet plan, for many of the natural joys of youth may slip away from the too fat.
But in the 1970s, dairy prices were flagging again. Dang, was it finally time for the government to let go of their artificially high dairy demand? Hell no! Those are our farmers out there. And after Jimmy Carter took a break from his peanut farm to be the president, the government gave the dairy industry another lifeline in the form of the Food and Agriculture Act of 1977, which increased the price the government would pay for milk. And it's important to mention here that the mom and pop dairy farm you're probably thinking of,
Jane, I think they're here. I see their car. Are you sure? Sure, I'm sure. Oh, run tell Mom.
had largely died off and given way to big dairy producers. The roughly 4.5 million, yes, million dairy producing farms in 1940 were largely consolidated into just over 400,000 much larger dairy operations by 1974. And when big profit-oriented dairy operations are told that no matter how much milk they produce, the US government has to buy it, exactly what you're thinking of happened. Dairy farmers produce the shit out of milk, but the demand for it just wasn't there, and the US government had to step in. The feds dropped $2 billion in just 4 years buying excess milk. And since milk doesn't keep, but cheese kinda does, the government began to accrue a staggering amount of cheese. It was so much cheese that they had to rent out a massive amount of cooled storage space just to keep it from going bad, and by 1981, the US had become the proud owner of over 500 million pounds of cheese stored in 150 warehouses and caves across 35 states. When Ronald Reagan got into office, he highlighted these cheese caves as a reason why the US government shouldn't be manipulating prices, which is probably the correct take and also reminds me of this article from Clickhole. Reagan decided to just give the cheese away for free to low-income and elderly people, and it was this government cheese that became known as government shit. I set that up wrong. Whatever. That's government cheese. That's what government cheese is. It doesn't refer to money. It refers to that literal cheese that they gave away. But you don't have to take it from me. Here is TV's most will they, won't they couple, Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg.
Government cheese or regular cheese?
It started out as government.
You damn right it did. Don't you lie. Don't come on here lying.
Why
They
would
come
I-
in a big-ass box. And the government, if you needed some kickback,
Yep.
it would find its way to your refrigerator.
It found its way to Alderson, where I was for 5 months.
Oh, wow.
You're gonna sit there and tell me with a straight face that this is a strictly platonic relationship? Please.
There's a dip me.
In a desperate attempt to reduce the amount of milk being produced, Congress passed the Milk Diversion Program of 1983, which literally paid farmers to not produce milk. Did it work? Well, that depends. If you think the government spending almost $1 billion in 1 year to pay farmers to not make milk constitutes a working policy, then yeah, it worked really great. No, it didn't work. This is the kind of thing that Fox News dreams about. The government is paying our hardworking farmers to not work. That's big government overreach. Poor farmers, the government is transing all the milk. And of course, another official attempt to reduce the milk supply, and therefore the amount of dairy the government was forced to buy, came in the 1985 Farm Bill. It was called the Dairy Termination Program, and the government would send farmers a check to exit the industry and kill their dairy cows. It was a mess. To make matters worse, the premise that milk was a healthy, nutritious choice was having a small problem with reality. As health science was evolving and pregnant women were no longer being prescribed a pack of cigarettes for their morning sickness, the United States Department of Agriculture's nutrition guidelines increasingly called for less fat and cholesterol and naturally a reduced intake of animal products. Now, milk is high in calcium and protein, but it's also high in saturated fats. And when heart disease went from being a background actor in 1900 to #1 on the call sheet for what was killing Americans in 1960, people began to ask questions. But the USDA had a massive conflict of interest. They're the government agency in charge of making sure Americans eat a healthy diet, and they're in charge of making sure US agriculture is booming economically. And when those two things are in conflict, it seems like they take the economic one a little more seriously. According to a report from expert nutritionist Marion Nessel, when the USDA was getting ready to release its brand new food pyramid in the 1990s, the animal agriculture lobby caught wind that new dietary recommendations might point people away from consuming armloads of beef and dairy, and somehow that version of the food pyramid got pulled. and replaced with a new and improved food pyramid that emphasizes 2 to 3 daily portions of meat and dairy, just like they had since the 1950s. Curious. And not to put too fine a point on it, but milk is not really a vital part of the adult human diet. Early humans were not surviving by sneaking up on wild cows and ripping a blast of milk off their udders. Drinking another animal's milk into adulthood is a fairly modern and honestly kinda weird practice. And if you need more convincing, here's a stat for you. More than half of all adults globally are lactose intolerant. Yeah. How is it that all those people are somehow able to survive without dying from osteoporosis? Now, obviously, something had to give. The government could not keep mindlessly subsidizing as much dairy as corporate producers were able to make. Dairy had gotten so big and iconic that it would have been politically insane to let the industry implode, but its size had created headaches on every level. But what if the American public suddenly wanted to buy more dairy than it had ever dreamed of? Like, what if dairy demand just skyrocketed? Well, that would allow the government to stop having to pay for all this excess cheese and allow the dairy industry to take care of itself. That would fix everything. Now, was there any sign that the public actually wanted this? No, not really. But why ask people what they want when you can tell them what they want? In the early 90s, prompted by legislation to shift the burden of the bloated dairy industry to the general public, federal and state governments unleashed a slew of dairy promotional groups designed to essentially trick US consumers into demanding a whole lot more milk. They're called checkoff programs, and no, they're not named after gun enthusiast / playwright Anton Chekhov. The checkoff refers to the forms that agricultural producers filled out. Instead of every farm having to fend for themselves on marketing, an industry could band together, pool their resources with small fees on their products, and lift themselves into profit and victory as one. There's checkoffs for beef and eggs and honey and watermelon. Even Christmas trees have a checkoff program. With cheese. But due to the sheer size of the dairy industry, dairy checkoffs Godzilla'd their way across America, spending hundreds of millions of dollars every year. They were so big that dairy had separate programs for fluid milk, which, gross, and general dairy. And less than a year after they were founded, the California Milk Processor Board blasted off with one of the most famous ads of all time. You know it, it's about milk.
And that was the Vienna wood dance indeed. And now let's make that random call with today's $10,000 question. Who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel? All right, let's go to the phones and see who's out there.
Hello?
Hello, for $10,000. Who shot... Excuse me?
Hold on, let me get some milk. No!
I'm sorry, maybe next time.
Got milk?
And goddamn, I know I said this before, but that's an incredible ad. And it should be, because the California milk processors budgeted $25 million to start the campaign, and they got Michael Bay, yes, that Michael Bay. Yeah, this Michael Bay. Michael Bay. Can you imagine how much money you have to get Michael Bay to direct your milk commercial? Got Milk exploded. It got picked up by a national checkoff program called Milk Pep, and pretty soon it became one of the most popular print ad campaigns of all time. They got Shaquille O'Neal, Martha Stewart, Alex Trebek, Stone Cold Steve Austin, fucking Mario, and an insane run of hundreds of celebrities smiling with a mixture of milk, ice cream, and sour cream slathered on their top lip. By the end of the campaign, 80% of America had seen these print ads. The budgets were huge, and they were still dropping some of the best TV commercials of all time.
Drink your milk, kids.
I don't want milk. Milk's for babies.
Yeah, babies.
Oh yeah? Well, I happen to know that milk helps build strong bones. So drink up.
Well, Mr. Miller told me he never drinks milk. Look at him.
Yeah.
Hi, kids.
Oh, that's not good.
Got milk?
And remember, these are just promoting the concept of milk, not a specific brand, just the idea that you gotta get yourself a nice, cold, thick, creamy glass of that white gold. Gross. But despite the massive reach of Got Milk, Americans continued to drink less and less milk as the campaign went on. People had access to an increasing variety of drinks, and maybe the average 90s kid thought drinking a soda at the movies was more appealing than a milk, despite what weirdly jacked Malcolm in the Middle says. But the dairy industry had another plan, a weirder plan. A plan that would forever change the face of food in America. Hey, Rollie. Hey, what's up? What? Right? Remember? Okay, stop. Sorry. Hey, do you mind if I do a quick plug for the Patreon page right now? I'm just about to do the big reveal for this video. I know, it's just that the Patreon page is the engine that makes all these videos work, and I will be so quick. Okay, go ahead. Awesome. Hey, thanks for watching Climate Town. If you want to see more of these sort of heavily researched, try-hard, like millennial-coded, research-driven climate comedy, climate edutainment, whatever it is. It takes literal months to fact-check and cross-check and call experts and archival footage and editing. The editing, my God, man. I sit at this desk like 9 hours a day. I'm there too. It's not.
Hey, other Rollie here. I don't know what those Rollies are talking about, but it seems like they want you to pay for stuff that's already free on YouTube. So I don't know, explain that.
Hey, sorry about that. Sincere Rollie here. Basically, at Climate Town, we are a small and very dedicated team of people, and we do everything from researching, writing, fact-checking, and editing all these videos about topics we think are really important, and we put them all online for free. Anyone can watch these because we think that they are important for people to know about. The thing is, the only way we're able to do that and fairly compensate the people who work on them is with the generous support from our Patreon community. That's people just like you. That's maybe even you. In which case, thank you so much. But it's not just a one-way street on our Patreon. If you're throwing us $5 a month, we are blasting you with extra content. I'm talking about behind-the-scenes footage, blooper reels, exclusive clips from our very fun live shows, monthly town halls. We even have a Climate Town phone, and we give you the number, and you can call it, and I will usually answer. Not all the time, but better than 50% of the time, I pick that shit up and I talk to whoever calls it. It's pretty fun for me, honestly. So if any of that sounds good to you and you'd like to support what we're doing over here, the best way to do that is on our Patreon page. Sincere Rollie, over. And we're back. Where was I? The dairy industry infiltrating American food. One of the most successful groups created by the Chekhov program was Dairy Management Incorporated, or DMI. And sure, DMI would do the good old classic marketing like, the power of cheese.
Let's eat!
The power of cheese.
But they also had another idea. Get the biggest restaurant chains in the country to stuff their food full of millions of pounds of extra cheese, whether you asked for it or not. And it fucking worked like crazy. Since their founding in 1995, DMI claims responsibility for the following items. A Domino's pizza with so much cheese that each individual slice is 2/3 of your daily maximum recommended saturated fat intake. The Taco Bell quesalupa, in which the taco is filled with cheese and the shell is somehow stuffed with even more cheese. A Domino's pizza available in Japan called the New Yorker 1 kilo ultra cheese pizza that, true to its name, has over 2 pounds of cheese on it. And just so everybody's clear, DMI has its own dairy scientists whose job is to work with food chains to develop new menu items that incorporate as much cheese as humanly possible. Pizza Hut customers are not picketing the restaurants demanding more cheese. DMI employees like Nitin Joshi, who goes by the nickname Dr. Cheese, are changing the pan pizza Pizza Hut recipe to add an additional 25% more cheese, leading to Pizza Hut using an additional 150 million pounds of milk every year just for their pan pizzas. Here's a crazy stat. 25% of all the cheese we make in America goes on pizza. Now let's see it in pizza slices. Wow! We did not ask for this, and yet here we are. And I'm not saying cheese isn't delicious. People obviously like eating cheese. The problem is the volume. We're not over-consuming all this cheese simply because we like it, we're doing it because it's getting jammed into food and served in every major city in America. And you don't even have to take my word for it. Take it away, actual ad from Pizza Hut.
America, say cheese, because the revolutionary insider pizza from Pizza Hut is loaded with it. Cheese inside and out, cheese up and down, delicious, hot, bubbly, mouth-watering cheese in each and every bite. An entire pound of cheese. Hey man, that's like winning the cheese lottery. And not just one, but 6 kinds of succulent cheese baked inside 2 thin crusts. There's even more cheese on top. How do we get it all inside? Hey, we're Pizza Hut, and around here we put cheese in places you've never dreamed of.
And I could go on, and I will. Pizza Hut's Summer of Cheese, which they claim sold an additional 100 million pounds of cheese. This delightful little jump scare, sorry about that, featuring the current president eating his stuffed crust pizza ass first. The New York Times even dug up a letter from 2 executives at Pizza Hut that they signed Lord and Lady of Cheese. So even if Americans were drinking less milk, by 2010 we were eating triple the cheese we were in 1970.
You put cheese in places you never dreamed of.
And in that stretch, cheese became the #1 source of saturated fats for Americans. Now this might be alarming if you're someone working in nutrition or the obesity epidemic, but did dairy management seem to care? Let's go to the board. Oh no! But the dairy industry wasn't just stopping at sneaking extra cheese into your food, they took aim straight at the problem and began promoting dairy as a way to lose weight. And according to the New York Times, the dairy industry was feeling particularly excited about this weight loss angle after a study that showed a potential link between dairy and weight loss, and also newly relaxed federal rules on health claims. Fun. They ran one campaign called 3 a Day of Dairy. Burn more fat, lose weight, where the dairy checkoff reminds consumers that milk, cheese, and yogurt may help in weight loss efforts when paired with a reduced calorie diet and physical activity. Which, of course you may lose weight, you're running your ass off and dieting. Here, wear this hat. Now starve yourself and work out twice a day. Introducing the incredible health hat. DMI was so excited to help people lose weight with dairy that they doubled down, partnering with the NFL on advertising and also commissioning their own additional studies to try to find more aggressive weight loss claims they could add to the marketing. But then the darndest thing happened. The studies didn't say what they wanted. One study at the University of Vermont, paid for by DMI, found no evidence of weight loss linked to dairy consumption. But DMI didn't much care for that. When the lead author of the study gave them the bad news, they threatened to audit her work and then just pushed on with a campaign anyway. Eventually, the Federal Trade Commission stopped the dairy-based weight loss campaign, but not before it had run for several years. I think the chairman of the nutrition department at the Harvard School of Public Health put it best when he said, "The USDA should not be involved in these programs that are promoting foods we are consuming too much of already. A small amount of good flavored cheese can be compatible with a healthy diet, but consumption in the US is enormous and way beyond what is optimally healthy." And to really stick the landing here, from 2003 to 2006, cheese was responsible for 16.5% of all the saturated fat people in the US consumed. It was double the next biggest sources, one of which was just milk. But even after their nutrition claims were getting challenged, they were still pushing dairy in schools. That campaign is called Fuel Up to Play 60, and for a 90-second commercial featuring hundreds of possessed children dancing, they say the word milk a surprising 0 times. Just eat healthy, get an hour of exercise a day, and if you happen to find a vase of milk on your desk, why not take a few healthy sips? And it's not hard to see why dairy loves being in schools. Habits we form in childhood can stick with us through adulthood, and the National School Lunch Program literally requires schools to provide milk to students at every meal under pain of losing their federal funding. It's also a nice big dairy market because schools account for about 8% of all fluid milk sales. But it's not exactly the regular milk you might be thinking of. A 2014 report about the dairy industry's push into junk food found that 70% of milk served in schools at the time was actually flavored milk, like chocolate or strawberry. And one 8-ounce serving of True Moose strawberry milk from that time period had 21 grams of sugar, which is not all that different from the 26 grams of sugar in an equal serving of Sprite.
With obesity rates just flying through the roof, it is important that they know as a child now.
You need to be getting 3 servings a day at least of dairy.
Milk is about the most perfect food there is. A glass full at every meal is good for you.
And if they weren't struggling hard enough to maintain their hold over America, the dairy industry had a new threat they needed to contend with: climate change. I believe their feelings on the matter can be best described by poet laureate Martin Lawrence.
Just got real.
In 2006, the Food and Agriculture Branch of the United Nations released a report called Livestock's Long Shadow that took a look at the impact of animal agriculture on climate change, loss of biodiversity, air and water pollution. It was a sort of, hey doc, why don't you test me for every disease you can think of kind of report. And the reason I'm talking about it right now is that the results were fucking terrifying. The big headline from the report was that keeping livestock to milk and sliced into chunks generates an incredible amount of greenhouse gases. Probably somewhere between 14 and 18% of all the greenhouse gases humans produce. And it's not just carbon dioxide. Livestock also generates the roided up heat trapping gas known as methane. Cows belch up methane as part of their digestive process, and each molecule can trap 80 times more heat than CO2 over the short term, and the UN report concluded that something like 37% of all the methane humans put in the atmosphere comes from livestock. Cows are also responsible for a staggering amount of freshwater use, especially in dry, arid climates where the water is constrained. We did a whole video about this, so check it out, link in the bio, watch it if you feel like it. But the TLDR is that animal agriculture is so water intensive that over half the water in the Colorado River goes to growing crops we feed to animals. Livestock were also found to be a major factor in biodiversity loss in marine ecosystems due to mismanagement of phosphorus and nitrogen runoff. There are parts of the dairy-heavy Central Valley in California where drinking water is so polluted by nitrogen runoff that tap water is unsafe to drink. So obviously we should listen to the UN paper's lead author when they say livestock are one of the most significant contributors to today's most serious environmental problems. Urgent action is required to remedy the situation. And it seems like the beef and dairy world really took that to heart. Not the climate part, obviously, they hated that. They really locked in on the urgent action is required to remedy the situation part. You see, it was DEFCON 5 at the cheese factory, and this was gonna require more than got milk ads and stuffed crust pizza. It was time for dairy to get a little bit of help from some industries who had been down this road before. I'm talking, of course, about the tobacco industry and their jacked tan cousin, the fossil fuel industry. But first, a ad? If you've been on the internet lately, you'll know you shouldn't blindly believe everything that pops up on your feed. Enter Ground News. Ground News is an independent news app and website designed to help you break through your algorithmic bubble. It pulls together global news, then breaks down each reporting source by political bias, factuality, and even ownership to help you actually understand what's going on. Take the FDA's recent food safety cuts. Ground News found dozens of sources reporting on the FDA suspending inspections after staff reductions. 93% from centrist or liberal outlets, with a lot of them criticizing how the agency buried an E. coli outbreak. The right is mostly quiet or focused on how contractors are replacing the staff who used to conduct these inspections. Partisan spin is a lot of fun, but it could have real human health consequences. That's why I love their blind spot feature, which shows stories being ignored by the left or the right that you could otherwise miss. And I'd feel selfish keeping all this to myself, so I would like to offer you, yes you, an exclusive 40% discount on the same Vantage level subscription that I've been using. So go to ground.news/climatetown or click the link in the description, or just scan this QR code to get it all for just $5 a month. And we're back. If you're just joining us now, what? You just jumped into the middle of a video? There's so much. What is your life like? You know what? That's actually an awesome choice. Stay frosty, brother. If that is you, we're just talking about how the oil and tobacco industries have been selling products that are definitely bad for people and the environment for years while largely avoiding accountability, and the dairy industry could just follow their tried and devastatingly true playbook. Step 1, public relations. The dairy industry just straight up hired the same PR companies that Big Oil and Big Tobacco hired when they pioneered their aggressive anti-science strategies. The best example is the PR giant Edelman. Someone told me they were the oldest PR company, but honestly, I didn't look it up. Okay, there are so many facts in this episode, I looked up so many goddamn things, I'm gonna let that one go. And honestly, what would you do with that information? Let's say they were the second oldest PR company and not the first oldest PR company. Who gives a shit? They're a giant PR company. Here's Edelman working with Big Tobacco to popularize the notion that there is no real evidence that inhaling someone else's cigarette smoke causes any health problems. Here's Edelman taking $327 million in just 5 years from Big Oil for everything from promoting tax deductions for the oil industry to opening up public lands for drilling. And good lord, wouldn't you know it, here they are working with the dairy industry to do some extremely similar shit. Oh no, the public is worried about climate change and sustainability, and the UN is saying meat and dairy need to fundamentally change? Well, don't you worry, cause dairy is going green. In 2008, Edelman helped DMI set up the Innovation Center for US Dairy. Don't worry about us anymore, world. Now we're sustainable, we'll take it from here. And we're really committed to advancing commitment, action, and knowledge sharing within pre-competitive social responsibility areas important to customers and consumers here and around the world. I have almost no idea what that means, and I kind of think that's maybe the point. So they began doing their own greenhouse gas emission studies, and they concluded that, okay, hear us out, maybe dairy is only about 2% of US greenhouse gas emissions. And that's nothing! Come on, you wouldn't get mad at aviation for being 2% of global emissions, would you? Oh, you would. Oh, that's actually a major fucking problem, and we really still need to decarbonize our sector. Okay, fine. So the DMI-led Innovation Center then comes out with their big climate clincher. They're gonna reduce emissions by 25% by 2020. Okay, honestly, that's a great start. So that probably means listening to the overwhelming majority of non-dairy funded climate and nutrition scientists, and maybe thinking about not trying to cram dairy into every single thing you could possibly think.
Warm melted cheese in the center of a beefy burrito.
Pizza Hut's rippable, dippable cheesy bites with 28 cheesy-filled bites.
The new cheese volcano.
Whammo! Creative accounting to the rescue. Oh, they'll think about funding some emission reduction programs like putting seaweed in cow feed and building massive digesters to capture methane from the cow shit, but the big reductions can be generated just by reframing the question. See, modern farming has figured out how to squeeze way more milk out of each cow. They discovered they can trick cows into thinking it's summertime year-round just by blasting them with light 16 to 18 hours a day, which boosts milk production. Factory farms have also taken over the US, and they're now cramming hundreds of cows into tight spaces and milking them 3 times a day instead of 2. The list goes on, but the result is cows that can produce 2.5 times more milk than they could 50 years ago. So when the dairy industry pays technically my coworker at youtube.com, Mr. Beast, to promote dairy to children, and he says something like this:
US dairy farmers are committed to reducing their greenhouse gas footprint from the farm to your fridge. Did you guys know that a glass of milk is made with 20% less emissions than it was 15 years ago?
It's a distraction from the fact that overall dairy emissions are, let's go to the board. Oh no, it's up! What? How could this have happened? Yeah, what they gained in efficiency, they lost in making so much more milk that emissions are actually up.
Oh, that's not good.
Anyway, that ad that we saw from Mr. Beast is part of a massive campaign called Undeniably Dairy. It was orchestrated by our friends over at Edelman, and it is a very sweaty attempt to stop non-dairy milk from catching on through the purity test of it's only real milk if it's coming from the exhausted, thrice-squeezed teats of America's 9 million dairy cows. And what the hell, they got the money, let's throw in an attack ad for non-dairy milk.
Have you ever looked at a tree and thought, can I drink this? Here's how wood milk is born. Not born, exactly. More like squished into a slime that's legal to sell. Got wood? Is wood milk real? Absolutely not. Only real milk is real.
All right, let's just take a second to remind ourselves here that the majority of adults on the planet are lactose intolerant and don't really eat dairy at all. But where do they get their calcium? Why aren't they boneless sacks lying on the floor in a puddle of wood milk? Well, it turns out there are many other foods, especially greens, that have a lot of calcium. 1 cup of spinach or collard greens has about as much calcium as a cup of milk, and I have no idea what nettles are, apparently some kind of food, but they have about as much calcium as yogurt. Anyway, the whole time that Edelman and DMI were working to convince America that real milk is sustainable and totally not a climate problem, they were also trying to increase dairy sales by paying food influencers to promote dairy. They called them the Dairy Dream Team, and does anybody remember that viral TikTok trend from 2022 where people would get together and make butter boards? You remember, right? You'd smear butter on a plank of wood, gather your closest friends, and then dip bread in it? Anyway, that was because of Edelman. Pretty weird. And we probably wouldn't even know any of this if it wasn't for a bunch of leaked emails, one of which starts with a very catchy, "Mornin', Queen." Just once, I'd like to feel what it feels like to receive an email that starts with "Mornin', Queen," like an earnest one. Fuck, that'd be empowering. And on the other end of the age spectrum, the dairy industry is still extremely cozy with officials in the US government. Maybe the best example is Tom Vilsack, a man who became the Secretary of Agriculture in 2009 under Obama, spent 8 years downplaying animal agriculture's impact on climate change, then left the government in 2016 to become the president and CEO of the US Dairy Export Council. I had never heard of the US Dairy Export Council either, but it's a non-profit organization founded by the dairy lobby to sell milk, and apparently the president and CEO makes about $1 million a year.
Can you use $1 million?
Well, you know what? Maybe that's actually fine. Maybe it's only a problem if you become the Secretary of Agriculture after you're the president and CEO of the Dairy Export Council, which he did in 2021 under Biden for 4 more years, making critical federal decisions about milk production. Sheesh. Stupid. Cut this. And the final move in the industry playbook is the classic Shaggy defense. You just deny the science. If your industry is already massively successful, like tobacco or oil or dairy, and you can create a little bit of confusion and manufacture some doubt, it can go a long way. Big Oil spent millions of dollars to successfully avoid accountability with their strategy of emphasizing the uncertainty in scientific conclusions. Why couldn't Big Dairy have a piece? So they hired notorious PR troll Rick Berman, a guy who got the nickname Dr. Evil from decades of PR work for America's sketchiest companies, to create some confusion about healthier plant-based food options. Berman's signature move is spinning up front groups with authentic-sounding names, like the Center for Consumer Freedom or the Employment Policies Institute Foundation. Just slap a Mad Libs of positive-sounding words onto a nonprofit, and pretty soon you got yourself the Cool Guy Institute for Health and Kickflips, telling you to drink a gallon of pennies to avoid lung disease. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here's Rick Berman himself in a hidden recording talking to a bunch of fracking executives.
You get in people's mind a tie. They don't know who's right. And you win all ties, because the tie basically ensures the status quo. People are not prepared to get aggressive in moving one way or the other. So I'll take a tie any day if I'm trying to preserve the status quo.
That was from a podcast called Rigged by Amy Westervelt. The whole podcast is incredible. Check it out, link in the bio. And to give their PR some extra ammunition, Big Dairy is dabbling in a little science of their own. Oh, you think methane is one of the worst greenhouse gases? Well, these guys say California's dairy industry is actually pretty close to cooling the planet. So it's anyone's guess what's really happening. Let's not even get into the fact that these guys are largely funded by big animal agriculture. And this alternative science thing could really be its own episode, especially when it comes to the beef side of things. And you know what? It will be. Put a pin in this part. We're doing a whole beef episode later that's a Climate Town guarantee. And the playbook has been working like gangbusters. Just like big oil, big dairy is still very much on top. Sure, Americans are drinking less fluid milk nowadays, I almost threw up in my mouth, but they are making up for it in cheese, yogurt, and butter. The average American ate 11 pounds of cheese in 1970, in 2003 it was 31 pounds per person, and now we have officially crossed 40 pounds per person every year in the United States, almost quadruple what it was 50 years ago. But when you consider the amount of milk required to make all the butter, cheese, ice cream, and all the other dairy products we eat, the average American is consuming 661 pounds of milk every single year. And since it's been almost 20 years since that UN report came out, and Americans are consuming more dairy than they have in decades, it should come as no surprise that the dairy industry has been incredibly successful at avoiding making all those changes that climate experts were begging them to make. So I'll say it again, great job, boys, you really nailed it. And you made it, my God, welcome to the What We're Gonna Do About It section. Let's talk about it. So I usually don't advocate for climate solutions that are anchored in the consumer's personal choice. Oil and gas and plastic are so baked into the fabric of society that avoiding them completely is extremely difficult and not always in your control. This is probably why fossil fuel companies love encouraging personal action, like monitoring your personal carbon footprint or asking you to recycle the plastic bottles they sell you.
People start pollution, people can stop it.
Fossil fuel companies know that's not gonna affect their business, plus it shifts the blame to you, so they're cool with it. What you choose to eat, however, is very much in your control. Diets are incredibly elastic. You could go 30 years never eating a single mango, and then try one, and then eat a mango every single day for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you should do that, but it's theoretically possible, and that is what the dairy and meat industry are terrified of. They're terrified of people deciding to opt into a plant-based diet. And the way I know this is because anytime anyone tries it, they freak the absolute fuck out. My favorite example of this is in Colorado, when the governor asked people to avoid meat for 1 day. Not like 1 day a week or 1 day a month, 1 single day.
That's unacceptable. We can't have leadership in this state throw the #2 industry in this state under the bus.
In response to this, the Colorado Cattlemen's Association rallied people to specifically eat extra meat on that day to cancel it out. Basically, the second a campaign to slightly alter your diet starts picking up steam, the meat and dairy industry treat it like an existential threat. And maybe they're onto something. So if you want to try it, a cool decision you could make is to reduce your dairy intake by just a little bit. If I said to eat cheese like the average American did in 2003, that probably sounds pretty easy, but it would actually mean cutting your cheese intake by over 20%. So maybe give it a shot, see how that feels. Or go all in, cut dairy completely out of your diet, see how that feels. Either way, your call. And if you're looking to get involved in some legislation, you could look at the efforts to reform the broken check-off programs that keep shoving extra cheese in our food. You can join any number of the groups that are working on that, check them out, link in the bio. But if you take just one thing away from this episode, it should be that the dairy industry has wormed its way into our diets without consulting us. And maybe the decision of how much dairy you consume should be up to you and not the Lord and Lady of Cheese. We did it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to, give us a like and subscribe. And if you want to see more of these videos, I encourage you to mosey on over to the old Patreon page. It's seriously the best way to help us make more videos. And it's not a one-way street. We give you some slick-ass content, and you get behind-the-scenes bloopers, exclusive clips from our very fun live show, and so much more. That's patreon.com/climatetown. Check it out. This whole episode was a collaboration with one of the best climate investigative journalists working today, Amy Westervelt. Her research was so important in writing this whole script, so if you liked any of this, you'll love her other work. Amy has a podcast called Drilled where she investigates the hell out of so many elements of the climate crisis, and it's worth your time for the archival media she's able to find alone. Seriously, go check it out right now. Also, a big thank you to Jennifer Jacquet. Her research and writings were critical in helping us wrap our heads around the massive behemoth that is the dairy industry. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We also have a podcast called The Climate Deniers Playbook that just started its 3rd season. We have a newsletter that's kind of like these videos except for written out, and we go even deeper down these weird little rabbit holes, and it's also got pictures, very fun. We also make hats and shirts in a very weird and meticulous way that we've made videos about why we do that, so get yourself one of those if you want. And that's the story. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye, Queen. Okay.
Okay. I have not tried marijuana. I have never used it at any time.
Did you hear that pop?
That's unacceptable.
Goodbye.